Picture this.
I want to talk about Mary.
I want to talk about Roger. So Roger's 16 years old.
And Mary is 16 and a half, and she's a student at a residential high school.
Roger started the morning with a free breakfast, and he really, really needed it because last night he was studying in his dorm until 2 a.m.
And Mary knew it was late, but she really wanted to make sure she was prepared for her physics test.
Roger's favorite subject is physics.
And she loves physics because the teacher is also the sponsor of the robotics team, and she's starting to think she can make a career out of that.
Yeah, Roger's in robotics too. Actually, now that I think about it, his roommate is the captain of the robotics team.
Yeah, Mary's roommate actually just won a regional engineering competition last week, and I think her project was on
renewable energy. Yeah, Roger's in it too. He's pretty consistently impressed with how gifted his friends are.
Mary is too.
Where does she go to school again? Roger's at the North Carolina School of Science and Math. It's right in the middle of that research triangle in the state of North Carolina. So where's Mary?
Mary is at the Weiser Girls' School, which is in a small fishing village in one of the most remote parts of Kenya. Now, these two places, where Weiser Girls' School and NCSSM are located, are separated by more than 7,500 miles and are differentiated by vastly different cultures, climates, histories, and challenges. One is in a city with over 300,000 people, has easy access to high-quality hospitals, universities, and colleges. The other is about 1/10 of that population, and most of that community survives off of less than $2 a day.
And yet, despite that, what we just heard about Roger and Mary suggests that they have parallel educational experiences. They're extremely similar, so much so that it's a little uncanny.
So how can that be explained? Is it possible that these are unexplored frontiers of new educational models?
And if yes, why are we the ones to be talking about that?
So my name is Maddie Katz.
My name is Zack Fowler, and for the past 8 years, Maddie and I have been working on a variety of the greatest health and education challenges all over the globe.
But we actually knew each other pretty far before that. We both graduated from NCSSM in the class of 2012. And NCSSM, you could say, gave us a lot. There was a lot of parallels between a holistic education experience that we got that covered a lot of bases.
It's true, and holistic was the right word for it. I mean, every single day I would think about the fact that I would have to go back to my hometown in Sanford, North Carolina, and people would say, "So how's school going?" And I hated that question. How are you supposed to answer that question? School is everything. It's where I live. It's where I study. It's where all my friends are. I don't know how to say a response to how's school.
NCSSM gave us everything from a state-of-the-art education, exposure to completely new areas of study, a whole new group of friends, and applied experiences like research opportunities.
That's true, and it was so comprehensive in nature, we started to think you could get anything you wanted from your time at NCSSM, even your future spouse.
So after we graduated at NCSSM, we both ended up across the street over at Duke University, and that's where we got involved with the Weiser program.
So Weiser is a girls' empowerment organization that's based in Western Kenya. And over the last decade, Weiser's been grappling with a very interesting question.
Can you create the country's best educational experience for girls in a region that has little precedent of girls' success?
In the area where Weiser is based, only 7% of girls finish high school. When Weiser was founded in 2010, in the history of this 30,000-person community, one girl had ever achieved any level of college education.
But Weiser was completely flipping that narrative on its head. Weiser students, 100% graduation rate. And of those alumni from Weiser, 93% of them go on to receive a university education. But more importantly, these girls that are graduating from Weiser are changing the narrative and the story of what a girl can be and do and achieve in her community.
And Weiser was accomplishing this using methods that felt all too familiar to me and Maddie. It was fully funded residential education. It was a focus on hands-on mentorship opportunities. It was applied learning in the classroom and outside of the classroom, bridges to employment, and yes, a direct STEM focus.
It felt a lot like NCSSM, just on the shores of Lake Victoria in a small fishing village. Now, Zack and I had the opportunity to spend several years working with Weiser for different projects, everything from fundraisers that were bake sales on the quad to undergoing qualitative analysis of their programming. But I think one of the things we really benefited from at our time at Weiser was being able to see the success of the Weiser model up close.
Now, we certainly are not the first people to recognize the value of the Weiser model, but we were the first people to grapple with the model with an NCSSM experience in our back pockets.
It was able to give us a perspective of the parallel experiences at the Science and Math campus and the Weiser campus. Both have this shared focus on holistic education. We're defining holistic education here to mean educational experiences that take a comprehensive picture of student well-being in both the program design and the execution.
But what does it mean to design a holistic education program? What's contained inside that term? What do we mean when we say holistic? And what holistic aspects are shared between Weiser and NCSSM? And once we recognize that, how could they learn from one another? Is it possible that Weiser is an unexplored frontier to improve holistic education, not just in Kenya, but in Durham and the entire world?
So let's start by looking at the similarities between the Science and Math and Weiser campus. First of all, both communities understand the impact of what a free education for most of all of their students can do. At NCSSM, students don't have to pay tuition because of the grants from the North Carolina legislature and help from the North Carolina Science and Math Foundation. This is a similar situation at Weiser as well. Most of the students at Weiser don't pay any tuition, room, or board, but there's a subset of the population from wealthier families that pay a partial fee to subsidize the experience for lower income families. Both of these communities understand the importance of removing a financial burden for families so that kids can experience a quality education. Another thing that both of these campuses have in common is accessible mentorship opportunities. As many of you know, Science and Math has a really successful program of having students fulfill mentee roles, working at different universities across the Research Triangle to have hands-on projects, and we also have highly qualified and highly accessible teachers in the classroom. Weiser has a similar model. Teachers at Weiser often stay long past the dismissal bell to be able to provide extra support and tutoring for the students on campus. They also volunteer to lead extracurriculars like clubs and sports, and this is fairly uncommon in the Kenyan education system. Essentially, both schools also provide core resource provision, and this is a huge important part of both places. Both school administrations understand the importance of having students have what they need to be prepared to learn, to be in the classroom in the first place. This includes things like meals, safe housing, health access, and health education as well. And these actually look pretty similar, both NCSSM and Weiser. There's also applied learning opportunities at both campuses. For example, at NCSSM and Weiser, both students have access to state-of-the-art science labs to further their education in the STEM classes, and they also have time and resources to engage in some pretty cool extracurriculars, like we mentioned robotics, computer science, and engineering. Lastly, the importance of the space to be made for social organization or to have friends. Both of these places the social circumstances are built around friends that you wake up with, that you eat with, you study with, you stress out together with. But these are really focusing on the fabric of creating these communities and are essential components to the residential high school system. So both of these communities have this shared goal, and they've been able to achieve some pretty outstanding results as a result of that. For example, both Weiser and NCSSM are ranked in the top 1% in terms of performance of their students in their region. Also, I think this is so impressive, both schools have alumni with 50% of them achieving a scholarship to tertiary education. That's not just getting into colleges and universities, but money to be able to receive those educations too. And what we think is really impressive is that both of these schools, 7,500 miles apart, had a shared goal of trying to prepare students for success in university and after. But they kind of had a different set of circumstances they were coming out of, but they've achieved the same approaches as a result. They came to the same conclusions of this is how we get these kids to have a successful life, to be able to get into colleges successfully, despite doing this completely independently of each other.
Now, despite the fact that NCSSM and Weiser have both experienced a lot of success and they share a lot of things, there's also the question of how you can improve on these models, right? What are the lessons to be learned? Where do you go after this? And where should we be looking for those lessons? It's understandable that if you were trying to do something as complicated as creating a holistic educational environment, you'd want to look to partners and peer institutions to learn how to do that. And institutions like NCSSM already do this extremely well. They reach out to partners at the Illinois Math and Science Academy, at Bronx Science in New York, at the South Carolina Governor's School. These are locations that NCSSM knows to turn to, and those institutions know to turn to each other as well. But as we've been hinting, there are other sources of inspiration as well around the globe that could be looked to. So what can we learn from rural Kenya? What can we learn from Weiser? There are a couple of things I want to highlight. We could do this for more than an hour, so I want to focus on 3 specific things. These are not necessarily entirely new programs. They're just new ways of thinking about the holistic model that are important. The first one I want to point out is psychosocial support. Now, most holistic education models have some aspect of psychosocial support. They have on-campus mental health services, they have counseling and guidance. It's not a surprise to hear that, and we believe that's a core part of holistic education models. But Weiser takes a slightly different approach, a different way of looking at this, and it starts with social organization, i.e. how you make friends, who your network is, who your peers are. Let's use NCSSM again as our example. That's our go-to here. At NCSSM, your social organization is largely derived from your residential experience. We sort people by halls, you move in with people, eventually they become your friends, theoretically, and over time, those people become your support network. They're people that you turn to for counseling and for psychosocial support. And so for that logic, your social organization eventually becomes your psychosocial support network. At Weiser, it's flipped. It's the other way around. So from day one, you walk into not a social organization, but a psychosocial support group. Because at Weiser, everyone is sorted not into halls, but into what's called houses of wisdom. These are peer-led counseling groups that meet regularly every single week after class. And during these sessions, sometimes you have a facilitating teacher, sometimes you only have peer counseling students. But regardless, you are discussing some of the greatest mental health challenges you're facing on campus. You're discussing issues in your community that are specific to your gender or to your background or to the region where you live. And yes, these conversations get fairly intense. They get very vulnerable. They get very intensive, and over time, you build a bond with the people you've spent time in these groups with. Now, here's the kicker. That bond extends outside of those group sessions, because at Weiser, the dining hall is organized by House of Wisdom. The athletics teams are organized by House of Wisdom. The academic competitions are organized by House of Wisdom. And so we see how, instead of your friend group eventually becoming your support group, your counseling group becomes your friends over time. It's an interesting way to think about this and maybe a different perspective for holistic models in the future. Second thing I want to talk about is student-led community outreach. Now, a service component, again, something fairly common for holistic education models. Pretty common to see a service day or a service learning department. But at Weiser, all community outreach is compulsory. Students are required to do this as a part of their attendance. And the reason is that Weiser believes, in order to build a holistic education model, you have to address the student's impulse to give back. That's a need in that student, to think, how can I return the favor to the people that are giving me so many opportunities? What can I do with this energy that I have? And how might I better myself by doing that? Weiser believes that's core, and so they mandate the outreach instead of offering it as an opt-in or a supplemental activity. So all students at Weiser are involved in school outreach at local primary education settings, local secondary school education settings, churches, community centers, whatever it may be. And we've seen tremendous growth in this. Students that participate in compulsory community outreach have been proven to be more likely to engage in leadership development opportunities. They have improved interpersonal communication. And data that we've been collecting over the last 10 years suggests that students have long-term improved social and self-empowerment, and they have improved self-esteem, and they have improved prospects for the future in terms of their hope. They're more positive about what might come down the pipeline. The last thing I want to talk about is a first-gen focus. Now, many of us are familiar with what a first-generation focus might be for an institution, but why would it be essential to holistic education? Well, at Weiser, first-generation focus is essential because more than 90% of students at Weiser are the first person in their family to finish secondary school. More than 97% of them are the first person to ever pursue tertiary education. So from the moment they walk on campus, the way Weiser addresses this is they have a teacher with a social work background that offers one-on-one individual personalized counseling sessions to those students to both bear the weight of being the first person to come through and the family pressure, right? There's expectations that come with being the first person to reach this level of education. But that's only part of the holistic view. What really comes in here when we talk about holistic education and the first-gen focus and its role in building that holistic model is that focusing on first-generation students creates a model where you're focusing not just on the student, but on their family, their fellow children, their community, and the generations that will come after them. Because when a girl's the first person in her family to attend secondary school, she becomes an informed guide of a process that was once confusing or seemingly inaccessible. And that means her younger sisters, her future children have a better chance of navigating this smoothly. And that's important because that has lasting impact for education in the region, which means that we not only need to be supporting first-gen students as a part of a holistic model, we need to be actively recruiting them, which is how you build that lasting impact.
Now, the lessons from this provide an important opportunity to learn for schools like NCSSM and across the world from what, at first glance, might look like an unexplored frontier. There is, unfortunately, a problematic model of a lot of innovations and ideas and resources moving from west to east, so from higher income countries like the United States and Western Europe to lower to middle income countries. There's whole industries that are based on this model, somehow with this idea that innovations that are built up in places like ours should be exported to lower communities.
But with what we're talking about with Weiser, we see that flipped around 180 degrees. And that's interesting for us to think about because it reminds us, it's an example of what we miss when we fail to look toward communities like Weiser's for guidance. And so as we reflect on everything that we're discussing here, on these suggestions, things that are shared and things that aren't shared, we want to ask all of you
to reconsider what we understand to be unexplored. There are so many schools of thought that would relegate a place like Muhuru Bay, Kenya, to be an unexplored territory. But as we've talked about today, places like Weiser are hotspots for grassroots community innovation that are transforming how education can impact a community.
And as people who have a vested interest in the long-term success of holistic education programs, like the one we're all sitting in right now, it's important for us to keep an eye out for these hotspots, for us to actively seek these models when we might not have looked for them otherwise. Because maybe the world's best model for holistic education isn't unexplored. You just haven't seen it yet. Thanks.
Thank you.